Learning to write your own riffs is the next step for most guitarists and songwriters out there, but I'm sure you've hit a point at which you felt like anything you made just kinda sucked, right? It's something we all go through that can get pretty frustrating, which is why I've developed a system that can help you the next time you sit down to write a song. So in part 1, I'll be walking you through this system and showcasing how it can help you turn even the most simple ideas into earwormy hooks. And part 2, I'll be deconstructing a riff I recently wrote using this exact system. So for me, most of my song ideas start out one of two ways. Either I'll start with a melodic phrase first, like a guitar riff, arpeggio, anything like that, and then reverse engineer the chord progression from the initial idea. Or I'll start out with the chords first, and then I'll loop these until I find something catchy to play over top. I'm a firm believer that the chords you place underneath a hook are actually far more important than the hook itself, especially if you make these chords a little more complex in sound. It tends to make simple riffs sound far more interesting to listen to. For example, let's take this really basic 4-note riff I've just written. The first pass through is this riff with some basic power chords played underneath, and the second is that same riff again with some less obvious chords played underneath. And it's not even just the chords themselves. You can of course make tons of great riffs using simple melodic phrases and power chords. Countless bands have done this in the past. But if you change up these chords in more interesting ways, either rhythmically or harmonically, it'll make anything you place over top of this sound much more interesting. So in this instance, I'm going to start out with the chords first. Quite often I'll record voice memos on my phone of short ideas I've come up with when I'm just playing around. This can be quite a good way of building up a bank of ideas to pull from whenever you need them. I was going through my phone and I found this jazzy Midwest emo sounding progression. So I relearnt this and then I recorded it into my DAW. I tend to at least double most chordal parts. As you can see here, I've got these two tracks and I've just panned them hard left and right, which sounds like this. So how do you find something to play over top of this? Well, usually I'll just noodle around until I find something I like the sound of, but to be a bit more specific here, I'll try to have a style of the riff in mind first, so it could all be octave based, maybe a low string riff, or something higher up. In this case I wanted the latter, something that was fast paced and a little funky to go along with the J-punk aesthetic of the chord progression. I ended up coming up with this part, which I'll play alongside my chord progression. I thought it sounded pretty strong on its own and didn't really need much else once I added some drums and bass over top. But at the end of each phrase, I felt like these few notes could be emphasised a bit more. Instead of layering the same thing again, I ended up recording these short harmony guitars just to go along with the very ends of each phrase, which sounds like this. So I'll do one final playthrough of the riff with the chords, harmony, bass and drums, so you can hear how all of this adds up to the final sound. As I briefly mentioned earlier, a great way of making your riff sound more interesting is to change up the rhythmic patterns of your chord progression. So if you've been searching for some new strumming pattern ideas, try watching this video next.